Our stories are a collection of moments tucked away deep inside our hearts and minds. Moments from the past. For some of us, what happened in the past can limit our present or cloud the future. We hear a voice from within, a voice that says, "You are damaged goods. You are disqualified, weak." What this world sees as broken, Jesus sees as beautiful. So may your grief bring about His goodness. May your pain bring out trust in His promises. The past that brought us shame can find renewal in one name.
All right, so we launched into a new series, and that song just speaks volumes about where we're going and how we want to look at what God is doing in writing a story in our lives, and how our story and God's story can just blend and meld themselves together, so that as we walk our lives out, we're walking out God's story in our lives. And each one of us has a different story, right? Every one of us has a completely different story from another, and so every one of us can connect and relate to this in our own way. It's not a specific way for each one of us that I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you some tools so that you can make sure that when you walk your daily life out, you're trusting in God and living in God and serving God in such a way that His story is coming through you. Now, the problem with all of that, here's the problem with all that. We struggle some days, right? There are some days when it's just like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to answer this? You know, I remember the time when it was really big to wear a WWJD bracelet. Anybody remember those? What would Jesus do? Right? Yeah. And so it was just this ever constant reminder of, you know, I should be asking the question in this situation, what would Jesus do right now if Jesus were informing me, if Jesus put His arm around me and said, you know, Dave, should you really be doing that? Should you really be saying that? Should you really be stepping into that? You know, all that kind of stuff. And so we're gonna talk about what that looks like over the next couple weeks. What does it look like for God to write His story into our story, and for our story to look more like His story, with our unique picture on it, our unique name on it. So we're going to start with something that I think is probably the ground zero for us, and we need to start right here. And it starts with a question. And the question, it goes like this: where is God when horrible things happen? Right? Where's God when really bad stuff takes place? Where's God at when the really ugly stuff takes place? When the hurt, the pain, the injustices, the wrongs, the things that we never expected, when the bottom drops out of our lives and in the world that we live in, where's God when bad things happen, right? And most of us wonder where God is at and why God chose not to stop it. I mean, if God has all the power in the world, right? And that's the questioning we go through, right? If you have all possible power, all ability, all knowledge, then why didn't you stop it? Or why didn't you prevent it? Or why didn't you end this? Or why didn't you fix this problem? I mean, just think about it. 6 million Jews during World War II. Come on, God. Where were you? What were you doing? What were you thinking? Right? And so there are people who step away from the faith and say, I'm not stepping into God's story. Look what happened. Look what happened. Look what God does. And we start putting this aspect on God that God is absent, right? That God is uncaring, unloving. God isn't engaged, isn't all powerful, mustn't be, or He'd have fixed my problem. He'd have fixed my situation, right? And we're left wondering, if this is how God works? Is this how God works? Because if this is how God works, I'm not sure I like your God, right? I've talked to people who have sat with me, and we've talked about faith, and their struggle, their point where their faith went off the rails was at this spot where something happened and they expected God to show up, right? Don't we? I mean, have you? I have. I've had things in my life where I just expected God to show up, right? I expected God to be there. I expected God to do something, and it didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, right? Didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen. And it left some pain. And for some of us in the room and watching and listening, it left a lot of pain. It's like, God, I thought you were bigger than that. I thought you were greater than that, right? And so couldn't you have canceled this out? Couldn't we have done something different? Couldn't we have gone a different path? And so starting today, we're going to take a look at some of the belief areas that we have in our lives so that we can be more devoted, more clearly directed in living out our lives clearly. But we got to wrestle with some stuff because there are some things where our faith life goes off the rails and we're just not sure, and we might have doubts and we might have questions. And if we're going to step into this devoted life, then we need to be certain about some things. And I think the first thing we need to be certain about is, how can I trust God? Because there have been times in my life when I felt like God just pulled the rug out from under me. Anybody? Am I talking to the right crowd? Right? Like, it's true, right? So let's just be honest. Let's just lay that down right now. Let's be honest and say, okay, there have been times when I've had some messy stuff happen in my life. It left pain, it left hurt, it destroyed my family, or it messed up my head, or it wrecked my heart. And I went to God and I didn't feel like God came back to me. Or maybe he was absent, maybe he was quiet, maybe he was silent, maybe he said, you're just going to need to walk through this. So we're going to take a look at what that looks like and how we can navigate some of these places in life that we go through. And so as we start talking about devoted life and God's story. Because God's story, first teaching note for us here this morning, if you're filling out your teaching notes, we love to do this. We believe that if you write stuff down, you remember it longer. God's story pushes us to trust in God, live for God, and serve God as we live out God's story, because God's writing a story. And here's the thing that we understand. Stories aren't always pretty, right? Stories aren't always pretty. How many Disney movies do the characters lose their parents? Right? It's like, wait a minute, how does this happen? Bambi, Cinderella, it's just on and on. All these people who have, horror stories, right, in their lives. This series was inspired by the song you just heard Kelly sing, and I really appreciate Kelly singing that because she's got her own story that she's living through, right? And so she's singing this from her own heart like any of us would. But I was introduced to the song. Kelly Wilson sings the song and wrote the song, and she's a country Christian artist, if you can separate those two, right? Or a Christian country artist. I'm not. So I hadn't heard the song, and I really, country isn't necessarily the genre I go to all the time. And so a friend of mine said, you got to listen to the song. This is a country song, and I know you're not a big country fan and all that kind of stuff, but you got to listen to the song. Annie Wilson is her name, and she sings this song called God's Story. And it talks about how God's writing a story. And this song hit my friend and her family really hard because they were walking through some issues in their life where they were challenged by the story that was being written and what was God doing in their family, especially in the light of a daughter who was having some challenges and still does have some challenges in life. And this family's been through some real challenges and some surgeries and all kinds of difficulties and issues and that they've had to face together, not just with God, but with us as kind of family wrapped around them, right? And so, it's easy in the middle of a dark night at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Doesn't God want to talk at 3 a.m? Anybody? Yeah, what is it about 3 a.m? But, those 3 a.m. conversations with God is like, God, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I know you anymore. I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to do. I don't know if this is who you are. I don't know how to navigate this anymore. And I don't know if I can trust you with my life anymore, because if this is trusting you with my life and it looks like this, then what am I supposed to do? And so this, I was talking with this family and she said this song made a difference. Because I realized that God was not letting us alone. Instead, God was writing a story and using our lives and our life story to write his story into our lives. And it was just an incredible testimony. They had heard that from a doctor, and the doctor said, you know what, her story is going to be her story, and your story is going to be your story, and every story is going to be unique, and God's writing a story. And so this song has really made a lot of sense out of a situation in our lives. where they've had some struggle with a daughter of theirs, of one of their kids. And as a matter of fact, right now they're on their way to Hollywood Studios down in Orlando, and they're going to have a great time. And they're going to celebrate. I think the family wished they could have been here, but they were listening, I think, online. So I just wanted to let you know that sometimes the messages you get, come from personal conversations I have with people just like you who are struggling. And out of that, I need to address a situation, because I figure if one person's struggling, a bunch of other people are too. Right? And that's where this one came from. And I just so appreciate that connection I have. And I'm able to come out of those kinds of connections and stand up in front of you and talk about truth and where we're supposed to go and how we're supposed to wrestle with these things. And so that's where we're starting this series, and that's what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks. And if you're ready for that, because here's the thing, we just come out of Easter, right? Easter's like this big thing, but so, okay, now the tomb is empty. Now what, right? Now what? Because I'm still wrestling with these feelings. I'm still wrestling with the situations going on in my life, or the issues that I've had to deal with, or the history I have in my heart. And so we want to wrestle with these. And we're going to take a look at a passage in 1 Peter today and wrestle with it today. Because at the end of the day, my desire is that you walk out of here with a greater level of truth or trust in who God is and what God is doing. And I know that's a challenging thing to do, to suggest that you're going to walk out of here with a higher level of trust in God. But I hope that as we unpack this passage and unpack life a little bit together, that you can walk out of here saying, okay, I can trust God just a little bit more today. And so if you stay with me, that's the goal as we dive into this series of messages. And so the first today is this whole idea of trust. How can we trust God? Because God just seems sometimes to be quiet. Sometimes it seems like crazy things happen and we ask God, where are you? And so, but we're supposed to trust him. We hear that, right? I grew up in a house where I was told you don't question God. Now maybe that was true for you too. You know, I had all these questions. As a kid, I'm a middle child. If you've ever studied birth order, middle children are questioners. They're renegades. I left home at 17, haven't been back yet. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and they just didn't ask questions like I did. And so, my mother would turn me over to the pastor once in a while, and I'd have, 50 questions for him. And he would just smile because, it's like nobody asks me questions. Because I was told around the dinner table, you just don't ask questions of God. You just don't question God, right? And I needed answers because life just didn't seem as cut and dry as everybody was making it out to be. And so this is a passage that gives me some hope and gives me some faith to live out of. But I want to unpack it with us today, because here's what it says. It's in 1 Peter chapter 1. I'm going to begin at verse 3. I'm going to read through verse 9. And you're going to hear the word faith and you're going to hear the word trust in here. But we're going to unpack what that looks like for us. Here's what it says. All praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. It is by his great mercy that we have been born again, because God raised Jesus Christ from the dead. Now we live with great expectation, and we have a priceless inheritance, an inheritance that is kept in heaven for you, pure and undefiled, that beyond the reach of change and decay. And that through your faith, God is protecting you by his power until you receive this salvation, which is ready to be revealed on the last day for all who see. So, be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you have to endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. You love him, even though you have never seen him. Though you do not see him now, you trust him, and you rejoice with a glorious, inexpressible joy. The reward for trusting him will be the salvation of your souls. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So Crosspoint is focusing on this whole idea of being a devoted follower of Jesus. And one of the things that we learned about 6 years ago was that the church has not done a great job at creating devoted followers of Jesus. I've been to several conferences since COVID broke out, and one of the conversations, the major conversation we've had in the last 6 years is how have we raised people to prepare them for something that is worldwidely devastating like COVID? And what we discovered, even though 80% of all people in the United States say, I believe in God, what we discovered is that there are people who believe and yet are not prepared. Believe and yet are not capable of navigating on their own. Believe but don't know how to live through difficulties and challenges that are going to come along, or how to put their trust in God. I believe in God, but when life happens, when stuff happens, when bad things happen especially, what do I do now? And what we discovered post-COVID was that the world said, I don't know what to do now. And so Christians were doing meltdown just like everybody else was, when we should be the ones who said, you know what? COVID's no big deal, man. I don't care. War is no big deal. God's still in charge. God's still on the throne. I trust this. I trust the process. And we're all like, I don't know about that, right? And that was the response. And so obviously we had a problem. It's not a new problem. This problem's been around for a long, long time. As a matter of fact, if you go all the way back to Cain and Abel, there was a trust issue. And one of them didn't survive, right? There was a trust issue all the way back to there. Music is filled with all kinds of references to God, and yet there's still trust issues, right? We still wonder what's going on. God, what are you doing? So we decided to jump headlong into this topic of wrestling with what it looked like to ratchet up our devotion, ratchet up our biblical knowledge, ratchet up what it meant to be devoted to Jesus in 3 different areas. And those areas are trust. How do we trust in Jesus? How do we trust the Lord? How do we trust in God? Because we were told, place your trust in the Lord, right? That's what we're told. And then secondly, how do we live it out? How do we live it out? How do we live this out every single day? In other words, we can trust in the Lord, which is kind of head knowledge, but heart knowledge and the application piece, how do I live this out every day, is so vitally important, because that's where oftentimes where things get lost. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, I even trust. But how do I put this into action when life really begins to happen? When hard things start happening. And then we're going to ask the last question in a couple weeks. How do I serve God? What does serving God look like? Because throughout Scripture, not only are we supposed to trust and live, we're supposed to serve. And so we're going to look at those 3 as what it looks like to be devoted. And then in May, we're just going to dive really super deep. I'm looking forward to it. We're just going to dive super deep in May and go into some really, really good topics for us on how we can live all of this out. But today we're just going to hit this first one, this idea of trust. And it's probably one of the hardest of the 3, and then we decided this was the first one we needed to get out of the way or deal with and wrestle with, because honestly, it's where most people get stuck. This is where most people get stuck in their faith, and this is where most people walk away from the faith. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who walked away from the faith, who grew up in the faith, were taken to church every Sunday, they still believe, the belief is still there, but they walked away because something happened and they could no longer put their full trust in God. And so they said, I just can't do that. If God would have been there, if God would have intervened, if God would have done what I was hoping he would have done. And what I want to say, this is our second teaching now, one of the things I want to say very clearly is trust is one of the hardest things to do. I recognize that. Trust is one of the hardest things to do, and it's one of the easiest things to lose. Trust is one of the hardest things to do, and one of the easiest things to lose. And once it's lost, it's hard to regain. And when we're hoping God is going to come through, and we're hoping God is going to solve the situation or change a person or heal someone or whatever it is we're hoping God is going to take care of, and it doesn't happen the way we want, we begin to lose trust in God. Like, God, I put my trust in you. I thought you were going to come through. And this is, didn't you say to your disciples, put your trust in me, put your trust also in my Father? In John chapter 14, didn't you say that? I'm supposed to trust in you? And yet, when I did, it didn't work. Like if this was the formula, I trust in you and then you come through for me, you didn't come through. And so what do I do now? If you can't come through for me, you didn't even come through for your disciples. You sat around the table and you had the Last Supper, and we're going to celebrate that today. But then of those disciples, one of them hangs himself. One of them is exiled for the rest of his life and has to live in loneliness and seclusion on an island in a cave. And the other 10 are brutally murdered. What are you doing, Lord? Is this trust? Is this what trust looks like? Because if this is the trust plan you've got laid out, I'm struggling, right? So they didn't understand, and I don't know that we understand either. I mean, he's telling them it's going to get brutal, it's going to get rough, and they're like, what are you talking about? And then they see him carrying a cross, and they see him beaten, and they remember, trust me, trust me. And then they see him lifted up on a cross, nailed there in the hot Jerusalem sun. Trust me, I got this, right? I can't imagine how those disciples must have felt, knowing that he had just told them to trust him, and they're watching him die. Now, they didn't know 3 days later he was coming back. They didn't know that. And I don't know about you, I don't know what the future is either. And in some days, it's hard to place my trust in him, not knowing what the future looks like. Like, I don't know how am I going to live this out, Lord. I don't know how I'm going to live the rest of my life if this is my new normal. How do I trust you in this new normal? And if we're honest with ourselves, there are times when we'd love to just be able to ask Jesus, where were you when the crap hit the fan? Where were you? And the only answers we seem to get are not good enough. Just not good enough some days. It feels like that, right? When the world's falling apart, where were you? I thought you loved us. Couldn't you fix this? I mean, I read this passage in 1 Peter chapter 1, and it literally says, so we're supposed to be glad because there is this joy that comes if we can sustain the trials. And the trials are there so that we can be refined, so that we can be better people. Like, okay, Lord, I'm supposed to go through difficulty, and the only thing you got is you're trying to make me better. This is your plan. You're making me better by going through a trial. Okay, I get the whole refining process with silver and gold and all that kind of stuff. You know, you pull the ugly stuff off the top and what's left is something more pure. I get this whole analogy. I understand, but do we really need to go through this? Do we really have to struggle with this? Because it says here there are going to be many trials, but it will bring you a lot of praise at the very end. Like, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait till the end. I don't want to wait to heaven. I need some of this now, Lord, because life is hard. And while we know it's not good to give the Bible a side eye, we're just kind of looking at the Bible and going, really? Really? I'm supposed to trust you through the trials. I'm supposed to trust you when it hurts this bad. And his answer is, yeah, you are. As a matter of fact, it's easy to trust me when nothing's going wrong. I mean, let's admit that, right? Let's all just put that on the table right now. It's easy to trust God when nothing's wrong, right? When everything's going well. My finances are fine. My family's fine. Everything's going well. It's easy to trust God then, right? It's easy to say, look what the Lord is doing in my life. I'm blessed, right? And then when troubles happen, it's a struggle. It's difficult. But God has called us to be people who trust. And he says here very clearly, he says, though you do not see him now, you trust him, and you rejoice with a glorious, inexpressible joy. The reward for trusting him will be the salvation of our souls. Okay, Lord, if the salvation of my soul is based on my trust, then help me learn how to trust you. Because there are days. And here's what I've learned. That God is always faithful. But God may not always be on Dave's plan. I don't know, put your name in there, right? Doesn't seem to always be on Dave's plan. Because Dave has a plan, right? I got a plan. And Me and God talk about the plan on occasion. And so I tell God what Dave's plan is, right? Hey, God, this is my plan. And God's like, really? I thought I was in charge. Right? That's God talking to Dave. That's how he talks to me. I thought I was in charge. You tell people I'm in charge. I said, well, God, yeah, I do tell people you're in charge. But then I tell you what I want. Yeah, okay, I get. All right, this is just your pastor talking right now, just here, right? Yeah. These are the struggles, right? The struggle is real. Like, Lord, I want you to make my plan happen. And God says, I want you to be with me in heaven. And I have to refine you for you to get there. You know, my son saved you, but now we're in the process of what the church calls sanctification. I'm going to make you better. I'm going to make this something you long for through the trials. Okay, Lord, I think I can do this, right? Been through lots of trials in my life, and so have you. And we can do this. But Lord, when do we see glory? When do we get relief from the trials? When does it all pay off? And it says here, when we get to heaven. When we get to heaven. So, okay, Lord, how do I do this then? And give me the practical piece of how do I live this every single day? So there are two things. I want to give you two things today that I think can be helpful in placing our trust in the Lord. Two things, because remember I said I want you to walk out of here feeling like you can have a little more trust in the Lord today. And so the first thing we can do is the same thing we would do with another person if our trust was broken, if our trust was damaged. What would we do with another person? We would not ignore them, although that's what we want to do. Instead, we would sit down and have a conversation with them, right? And so the first thing we need to do with Jesus is we need to talk to Jesus if our trust with Jesus has been broken. If my trust with Jesus is damaged, I need to sit down with Jesus and have a conversation. He and me, not side by side. It's not like Jesus, you're over here looking forward and I'm over here looking forward. No, I need to turn the chair and I'm going to turn Jesus around and he's going to face me and we're going to have a conversation about this. Where were you? What am I supposed to be learning from this? Could you have done this differently? What were you thinking? What was your plan for so-and-so that caused so much hurt for everybody else? Where were you when I was being hurt and I was crying out for you? I need to have that conversation with Jesus and just be completely honest with him. I need to lay my heart out. I need to lay my truth out. I need to lay my difficulties, my challenges. If I'm going to trust him, I need to lay it out to him, right? Just like we would into another human being who's broke our trust. I need to lay it out. Look, I'm having a hard time trusting you on this one because the last time we did this, I felt that knife in my back, right? The last time we went through this, I felt like you left me hanging, right? And I don't want to go through that again if that's what you're going to do. And so we have to have that conversation with that person, right? I need to have the same conversation with Jesus if I'm going to trust him. And so I think all of us need to do that. And so the first thing practically some of us need to do is we just need to find some space and we need to have a hard conversation with Jesus. I don't know if you need to physically put a chair in front of you. You sit in a chair and put an empty chair in front of you and just vision Jesus being there and you're just going to have a conversation quietly with Jesus, you and him. I have these conversations with Jesus in my truck. Me and Jesus talk a lot in my truck. If you drive past me and my mouth's moving, I could be doing one of two things probably. I'm either singing along with a song or I'm talking to Jesus. And I talk out loud in my truck to Jesus. Sometimes I'll put my hand out. I'll drive with one hand because, it's a truck. And so, there's attitude about that. But anyway, it's kind of like putting the cowboy boots on. It just comes with an attitude. So, I got one hand on the steering wheel and I got my other hand over here and I just think he's holding my hand, right? Jesus got my hand. Sometimes he's squeezing hard, right? And I'm driving along and I'm talking to him and he's squeezing my hand. And I'm like, and then I'm squeezing his hand like, but you said, and he's like, yeah, I know. But read the rest of the story. I got more story for you, right? I'm holding on. But we're having this conversation, and I don't know where your conversation needs to happen, but for some of us, the conversation needs to happen soon. Because we're carrying stuff, we're carrying baggage, we're carrying hurt and we're carrying pain, and because of it, we're pushing trust further and further away. And God would love nothing more than to do some miraculous things in my life and yours, but it's going to take some trust for us to do that, right? We know that. I'm not telling you something you didn't already know. You can't do great things if you don't trust, right? Can't take a leap if you don't trust. The second thing we can do is we can offer trust in small doses. This is what we do with friends. This is what we do in family. When family breaks our hearts or something happens and there's distance or there's hurt or there's pain, we offer trust in small doses, right? Like, I'll give you just a little bit of me and we'll see how you can handle it, right? And if it comes back and it's all okay, I'll give you just a little bit more. Right? When trust is broken, we want to heal that trust. We want to renew that trust, to restore that trust. But oftentimes what we can do in that restoration is give you bits and pieces of my trust. I'm not going all in on you, right? You hurt me the last time. I'm not doing that again, right? So we do bits and pieces, and we can do the same with God. God, I'm going to give you this. And we'll see how it works out. And when God shows up, we can take the next step because he's building trust foundations in our lives, right? And so one of the things that we can do is just offer trust in small doses. And what I would tell you is the time it takes to do that is really commensurate with the level of brokenness in our lives. For some of us, it just takes some time. God, I want to trust you, but not yet. I would love to be all in, but not yet. I can't do it. So I'll give you a little bit, right? I'll give you a little bit, and we'll see how that works out. And if it works out really well, I'll give you more. And some of us in the room, some of us listening right now, need to just give God a little bit. Just hand some things over. That one situation that hurt you, that one situation where you thought he was going to come through or rescue you or save somebody or save something, and it didn't happen. And you would love to trust him more. And so give him just a little bit. Give him some room and see what can happen. Lock arms with the Lord and see what he can do. Have that conversation face to face and then say, okay, now that we've talked this out, I'll give you some of my life. I'll trust you. So Lord, today we trust you. We want to trust you. We'd love to trust you, Lord. As we bow our heads and close our eyes before you, Lord, we know you want us to trust you, but we find it challenging in light of all of the things in the world that are happening. And all the things in my world and our worlds, individually, personally, are happening. So Lord, help us trust you. Because in trust, joy can happen, peace can happen, world change can happen, life change can happen, family change can happen. Amazing things can take place if we trust you. So Lord, look deep into our hearts. Look and see those places where we're struggling to trust you more. And help us take the next step in trusting you with everything we are. Because Lord, we'd love to be all in with you. And we know, Lord, that you have an enemy. We have a common enemy that would love for us to not trust you. To always be fearful. To always question. To always doubt. We know the one who stands against you would love nothing more than that. Because if we sit in there, we sit idle. We sit in pain. And that's not what you want. So Lord, help us trust you. Even when it's hard. You ask your disciples to trust you. And they were going to see something really, really hard. They were going to watch you die. And so on the night before your death, you sat with them and gave them this meal of bread and juice and asked that they would never forget you, always be reminded of you through these elements of bread and juice. And so we ask that of these elements today, Lord, that you would fill them with your Spirit. Remind us, use these elements today, Lord, to remind us you're still on our team. You're still on our side. You're still writing a story. You're not done yet, and we can trust you because you know all things. You know our future. You know everything that's going to happen. You know every aspect of our lives. You know us better than we know ourselves. You're the one who counted every hair on our head, not us. You're the one who sees into our hearts, not us. You're the one who sees all of our lives laid out. So Lord, as we eat this bread today, as we drink from this cup today, help us to remember you and trust you more. Even if it's just a little more than it was when we walked in here. Bless these elements and all of us who receive them today in Jesus' name. Amen.